Hi, everyone. My name is Jack Rico, and welcome to episode 78 of Highly Relevant, a U.S. Latino podcast examining how Hispanics are influencing and reshaping mainstream entertainment in the United States. Well, on this episode, I welcome my good friend and culture critic Mike Sargent to talk about this week's new release, Han Solo, A Star Wars Story. And then we jump into the subject of if we'll ever see an all-black or Latino cast science fiction space film anytime soon. Stick around. This is the Highly Relevant Podcast. This Father's Day, skip the tie or new shirt and get him something that he will actually want to wear. Saxx underwear. This is not the status quo. Saxx is underwear reinvented. It's so comfortable, so supportive, there's really nothing else like it. Saxx underwear took something we all need and made it better. I mean, seriously, these are the best underwear I've ever tried. Their ballpark pouch is a game changer. It's designed with our anatomy in mind. It lets you move around comfortably no matter what you're doing. There is no friction, no chafing. Saxx has a large selection of styles, including training shorts. You can find the perfect pair for everyday wear, working out, traveling, and it's all backed up by their 100% comfort guarantee. There's still time to get Saxx underwear for Father's Day. Order a few pairs now and take advantage of this great limited time deal I've worked out. Shop from anywhere on their site and get $5 off plus free shipping on your first purchase. But to get this great offer, you need to use my promo code HIGHLYRELEVANT at checkout. Go now to saxxunderwear.com, that's Saxx with 2 X's, and use the promo code HIGHLYRELEVANT at checkout. Remember, saxxunderwear.com, promo code HIGHLYRELEVANT.
Heard about a job, big shot gangster, putting together crew.
I'm a driver, and I'm a flyer. I waited a long time for a shot like this. What do you think? Well, what do you know?
Welcome back. I'm here with my good friend Mike Sargent. You've heard him on the podcast many times before. He's one of the most respected critics that I know of, and I'm always very fortunate and grateful to have you on the show, Mike.
Well, I only come on the show so I can go Jack Rico.
Or Mike Sargent.
Jack Rico.
Especially with that voice. I mean, it's a treat for me, man.
That's it. There you go.
Let's talk a little bit about what this movie means in the Star Wars sort of franchise, in the machine of Disney's Star Wars franchise. Disney decided that they were going to buy the Star Wars franchise from George Lucas for about $4 billion. And they had a strategy where they were going to do prequels of a lot of the movies that we had already seen. And this is just one of those prequels where it's the origin story of the Han Solo character, extremely well done by Harrison Ford back in 1977 when he was first introduced. But a couple of problems happened with this project. Number one, there was a lot of the directors, they were fired. It's not that they quit. They were fired by Kathleen Kennedy, which is basically the person in charge of the Star Wars franchise for Disney. And they were fired because of creative differences. And then secondly, there was also the massive, enormous talk of Alden Ehrenreich. He's the guy who's interpreting Han Solo, and things got so bad with his acting that they had to hire an acting coach to be able to come in and help him get into the Harrison Ford Han Solo essence. And it looked like it worked, but it was a little embarrassing, I think, for him and for many people that, man, did we get the wrong guy? So what happens when you cast maybe the wrong person? Well, here's what you do. You stick with him until he gets it. And that's great support for him, but a little embarrassing, maybe even humiliating to a certain extent. But the guy's been able to manage it quite well. I don't know if people bring it up to him during the interviews. I think they're much more courteous than that and much more polite. But I was not expecting this movie at all. I'm like, why do we need a prequel of Harrison Ford? Here's my big issue with the film before going in, Mike. Number one, you can never replace Harrison Ford. And you can never replace the Harrison Ford Han Solo. So why even try? Ultimately, for me, Han Solo, A Star Wars Story, is not essential viewing, but it is mildly entertaining. I liked it. I didn't love it, but I was surprised. I thought this was going to be an utter flop, and it wasn't.
Well, okay. You said a lot of things there, so I want to back up a little bit. Now, I mean, I don't know if you read that article in Vanity Fair where he says that the whole acting coach thing was kind of blown out of proportion, and that the coach was really a writer-director named Maggie Kiley, who was supposedly just brought in for a couple of weeks, and that was it. That's what he says. Okay, so who knows? I'd deny it too. But now Alden Ehrenreich, I have to agree. He's not how I pictured Harrison Ford. He's much shorter. He doesn't have a fraction of the charm. Though I did think he was pretty good in the Coen Brothers film with George Clooney.
Yeah, I thought he was, because he was acting like the awkward shy guy, which Harrison Ford is not.
Exactly. So I give him credit. I will say that by, about a third of the way in, you start to kind of accept, okay, he's Han Solo. He's not Harrison Ford, but you start to find his, let's just say, the less Harrison Fordiness you equate to maybe, well, he was just young, and they were smart to have Woody Harrelson's character be this mentor that eventually Harrison Ford, Han Solo is going to eventually, start to emulate. Even certain lines. If you're a real geek, there are certain lines that the character that Woody Harrelson plays actually says that we hear Harrison Ford say in the original trilogy. Right. So that being said, so for him going in, I had very low expectations. I hoped it was good. Han Solo is my favorite character, but I did feel it was sort of unnecessary. Right. I think it's unnecessary because, unless, like, again, touching upon what you spoke about, Phil Lord and Chris Miller, are very specific. I mean, I don't know what you think you're going to get when you hire them. Look at their other films. And it really would have been fun, I think. And looking at the film, from what I understand, 75 to 80% of the film was reshot. But the stuff that seems the most wacky and outrageous, my guess is that was their contribution, because it's not out of step with the rest of the film, but it's sort of it's all of a sudden it's fresh. And then it kind of goes back to, like, your standard action, soap, space opera kind of thing. Right.
There's obviously the template of the Star Wars sort of a blueprint, all over it. So you knew what you were getting.
Well, you see, and I think that's coming to the last thing you mentioned about them getting fired is, I think Kathleen Kennedy, similar to Barbara Broccoli. Okay. I think Kathleen Kennedy.
Barbara Broccoli is the person in charge of the rights of James Bond.
Of James Bond, correct. And thank you for pointing that out. You're like editor-in-chief. And so similar to Barbara Broccoli, they have a successful formula. Star Wars has a formula. What that formula is of course, depends on how you see it. They've got, if you watch any of the Clone Wars film, TV series or the Rebels TV series, they've got Star Wars down. Like, they get it.
Oh, yeah.
You feel like you're in a Star Wars, like you're in that universe. So this universe is very well defined.
Right.
Now, but since there is so much Star Wars out there, there's books, there's movies, there's books, there's TV shows, there's video games, things that let you know, what do people come to the movie for? The sequels are following the template of the original movie, I think, more than anything else. As that was the biggest criticism for Force Awakens, that it was basically the same plot as Episode 4, and I thought the last one, The Last Jedi, had a lot of things wrong with it for me. Okay, in terms of what Luke did, but what the problem with the prequels is that they're sort of destroying canon.
Yeah.
But the prequels, on the other hand, are adding to the canon. They're staying within canon because it's already been established what's happened, so they can't really veer too far off. They just can try and give us explanations for things that already are canon.
Exposition to these characters and their background and their history, right, and the purpose for their origin and how do they get there. So all these things are now starting to kind of just give you a better picture of who these people are. They become much more three-dimensional now.
Right. And again, that's why I think Rogue One was so good and so well accepted. And, or at least the stuff that added to the canon that was, stayed within canon and added to it versus what's happening with the sequels. So that being said, I watched this movie in two ways. One, just as a film goer, let's, pretend I'm not a Star Wars fan. What do I think of it? And then as a Star Wars fan, there are plenty of things, there are references in there to all the things that only a total geek would get, a reference to having a Mingnock cookout. You know what I'm saying? Those are really geeky details. But overall, what makes this film, I think, work when it does is, we're meeting a character that many people don't know or don't know beyond that he's in the original series, because the original series at this point, that's like 40 years ago. So those movies, most people have seen them when they were kids, even if they saw them on video or TV. They know the character, but I think they're more open to seeing what this character can be. Mm-hmm. So I felt overall it was fun and enjoyable, but unnecessary.
Yes. Exactly kind of what I said. It's not essential viewing, but it is mildly entertaining. So if you're planning to go see this movie, don't feel like you're going to throw away your money. You're not. You're going to have fun. It's just not fun in the way that The Force Awakens or The Last Jedi were. These are movies that will get everyone talking about, that will build some sort of national conversation. This movie's not going to build any type of national conversation. It's not going to be the headline news in anything. It's easily going to be forgotten in about a week to 2 weeks when the next movies come out. And nevertheless, you can't discount the power of the Star Wars fan. Many people are saying that the movie's going to open to about $150 million domestically, which is incredible, to be honest with you. I didn't.
Well, I think
I was shooting for like 90 million, maybe.
Oh no, come on! It's a Star Wars movie.
If anything, I think Donald Glover overshadowed everyone in that.
I'm glad you brought that up, because I have to say, the film for me, the first third of the film, it was a little clunky. By the time when we meet, Lando Calrissian, the film hits a whole new level. And in my opinion, he elevated the film, because when he comes on screen, and I don't want to do any spoilers, when he comes on screen and you meet him and you see how he is, you realize how underused he was in the other Star Wars films.
Good
and
point.
It makes you realize how much potential this character has, who in reality would make a far more interesting story than Han, the way they've written him.
And there's been word that they might actually spin off a Lando Calrissian movie.
Well, there have been books. And again, I think the other thing, though, about the Lando Calrissian, I felt that his character was used 50% of the time it was great. The other 50% of the time it was like WTF. So
yeah.
So, and again, I don't want to give away anything. So, but I thought he definitely shined in the role. I wouldn't say he was underused, but I would say they started to really go somewhere with him, and then they seemed to pull back and kind of.
Well, because at the end of the day, it's a Han Solo movie. It's not a Lando movie. And
that doesn't mean he couldn't have some great moments and story points.
Right, but he's still, at the end of the day, a supporting character that kind of came out once in a while in the original movies. So I thought that was interesting, but at the same time, I think that he's shown so much that he overshadowed everybody else, that I think we should actually start really talking seriously about Lando and Donald Glover having his own movie. Do you think it'll happen?
Well, let's put it this way. Han Solo was a supporting character.
That is true. But he became part of the core of Star Wars. He became part of the core, but Lando never became part of the core, so maybe they might not do it.
No, here's what I think it comes down to. Because as much as everybody loves Princess Leia, there's never been talk of a Princess Leia movie.
Yes, there has been.
Has there? Serious
Yeah.
talk?
Oh.
Serious talk?
Well,
Serious talk?
okay. It depends how you define serious. I mean, if the rumor mill that begins in the press can lead up to serious, then yes. But they've been talking. I think this is the first step to do a prequel on Leia and on Luke.
No, I don't think they'll do Luke, and I don't think they'll do.
So then why
Leia.
Han Solo? Because if you don't do the other two, it just
I'll
seems
tell
like it's
you-
random.
I'll tell you why. Because Harrison Ford was so enigmatic in that role that he was very often quoted as being their favorite character. You talk to most people, their favorite character, if you're a girl, maybe it's Princess Leia. But in general, the favorite character is Han Solo. Han Solo, I think, was the breakout. If you look at Harrison Ford's career, he was the breakout star from the Star Wars movies.
I always loved Luke, but you're right.
Yeah, of course we like Luke, but let's face it, Harrison Ford was the person that, and his portrayal not only put him on the map, but it allowed him to have a career that far eclipsed anybody else in the Star Wars
universe. Right. You're absolutely right. And it's interesting because he saw the movie, and Ron Howard said, he revealed in an article that Harrison Ford had given his verdict, and he thought that that Harrison was raving about it after seeing the finished version. So, he liked it.
I don't see Harrison Ford raving about anything at this point in his career. He's a crotchety guy, but hey.
He said that Alden nailed it and that he made it his own. So what does that say?
Well, that says he respects him.
Yeah. It also says, it ain't me, kid.
Right. Well, again, I did enjoy it. I'm sure I'll see it again. It's they do some things again without spoilers. They do some things, especially in the opening of the film that'll surprise you. But then you realize it makes sense because it, like you said, it's not an episode in Star Wars. It's a Star Wars story, and they're really trying to delineate that thing. I think the fact that it's called a Star Wars story is part of what they're going to do. If they did Princess Leia, it would be Leia, a Star Wars story. It would be Obi-Wan, a Star Wars story. I think that's how they're going to brand that part of, Star Wars.
I think overall the movie did well. I really enjoyed Donald Glover, and it's interesting. Not many people are talking about this, but Thandie Newton was there.
Right.
She's not African American. She's British black.
She's British,
right?
British black. Yeah, African British.
After Rogue One happened, it really changed sort of the way I looked at science fiction movies, because they were mostly white for all my life. And then when I saw Prometheus and Idris Elba, that's when things started to connect. It's like, hey, why is it that we don't see more people of color in science fiction films? I mean, you're the guru when it comes to that with Afrofuturism. But here, this is another Afrofuturistic film, much like Black Panther was. We've had many conversations about this. It feels natural now to have people of color, women, leading the way. In these types of films.
You said something interesting. You said, you didn't notice. Oh, you didn't notice because it had become, that was normal. It was normal for science fiction to have futuristic visions. The future is all white. You look at movies from the 70s on. Let's not even talk about the 50s. Just from the 70s, pre-Star Wars and into Star Wars. Every science fiction movie, there were either, it's Logan's Run, it's the world of the future. World is perfect. There are no people of color at all. To Planet of the Apes, where the last, the black people are so rare that the apes, when they kill them, they stuff them and put them in the museum, and Charlton Heston runs by them because there are no black people in the future. So it's always been there, and if the black person is there, he's going to be the first character to die.
Right.
So what's happening?
Their fates are sealed. Yeah.
Right. Exactly. So it's a change in science fiction in general, and it's also given rise to Afrofuturism because now black people, black children, young black people, black writers can see themselves in the future and want to write about it and feel. When I was a science fiction fan when I was growing up, I used to have black people tell me, "What you like that for? That's not for us. We're not there. You never see us there." And I was always thinking, well, yeah, but we should want to be there, So it's a great thing for me as an adult to see so many characters of color in these films that are black and Asian, Latino, and Mongolian, and all these, like Rogue One had all the main characters.
It was a showcase of diversity. Rogue
Right.
One. I mean, it was a dream. I couldn't believe it. Before we wrap up, Mike, I think we're ready for this question, and you're the perfect person to answer it. Are we ready for an all-black cast science fiction film?
Dude, yes. Besides Black Panther?
Black Panther to me still isn't clearly a science fiction film in the way we've been brought up to science fiction, that it takes place in space, not in Earth, right?
Well,
I feel that Black Panther still, more than a science fiction film, it's still more a superhero film.
You must know to ask me. That's a loaded question to ask me, because that is how and why I got into film, because of the character I created. That essentially is like a black James Bond in outer space, and it's what I hope to make, and why I still make films. But that being said, I think we've always been ready. I think that black science fiction has existed for a long time. Afrofuturism is gigantic now. But I think the time will come. I think, there's more than enough room for science fiction that is blackface forward. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm with you, and yes, I do. Absolutely.
Unfortunately for me and my Latino peeps, I don't think we're going to see a Latino science fiction film for a generation or two.
It's interesting because I think in terms of Latino science fiction, there's a lot of that out there. It's a lot more it veers much more to horror or the supernatural. There are a lot of Latino
supernatural is fine, but to see ourselves represented as superheroes, I mean, look, I don't see ourselves being fully represented the way the African American community is at the moment for at least another 20 years. When I saw Diego Luna in Star Wars, and he really was the star to me, and he had a Mexican accent, I said, this is done. This dude's going to be making a movie a year. I haven't seen him work since then.
It's interesting because the industry is dominated the way it is. You look at the Mexican directors who have won Oscars for making Hollywood films. They star white people. So you've got one of the world's most talented surrealist fantasy filmmakers. And he just won the Oscar for this fantasy film, but there's even a black character in there. Okay. But there are no Latino characters, and so it's interesting because some of the most interesting science fiction I've ever seen, and some of my favorite science fiction films, are Spanish-speaking films. Films like Man Facing Southeast and Chronos and Sleep Dealers. There's so many interesting science fictions from Spanish language, but it's not the kind of science fiction. The Latino science fiction that I've seen is generally more towards fantasy or psychological, not these superhero things.
Yeah.
The Mexican superheroes, let's not even talk about what that was. That was like akin to wrestling back in the day.
Mm-hmm.
It occupies a different place in society. I think science fiction for different Latino cultures that are making films, but I do think I would like to see, these well-known directors who I didn't name, who are Latino directors, do something that's that forward, where you take it. They don't have to be well-known actors. They could be actors we don't know are great, but are great, and introduce them to the world in some of these films that they have the power to create.
I think it's time that we start taking the reins of our own destiny as a Latino community, man. Seriously, whether you're Latin American or U.S. Hispanic, it's time that one of us says, enough is enough. We're going to give you stories that break the stereotypes of what you guys think we should be. And I think somebody just needs to say, look, we're getting together. I'm a director and I know a bunch of actors, and we're all getting together to create a sci-fi film. And let's see how it does. But the idea that none of these ideas are even passing through the press. Like I read the Hollywood Reporter and Variety and The Wrap and Deadline and all these other, there's never any mentions of these genre films. I mean, every time you hear of a Hispanic director do a film, They're either supernatural or dramatic. You know what? The last one that I saw that was science fiction and had a Latino angle was Gravity by Alfonso Cuarón.
And who were the stars of that?
It was George Clooney and Sandra Bullock. And unfortunately, and this is where, I just get heated again, it's if you have a Latino director, why not put in a Latino actor in the ensemble?
Dude, that's what I was just talking about. That's the films I'm talking about. I'm talking about Gravity and I'm talking about Shape of Water. That's what I'm talking about.
Shape of Water is more of a supernatural one, right? As opposed to a science fiction.
Still, where's the Latino character?
And I've been saying this with Alejandro Iñárritu doing Birdman and The Revenant. There's no Latinos in any of their movies. There's just no Latinos in their movies. They don't help out the actor. You know what they help out? They help out the technical crew get opportunities, like Emmanuel Lubezki. These are the guys that they revere. They worship these guys for their talent because they make their movies be better. But for some reason, what hasn't trickled down is their effort into uplifting the Latino actor.
And it's interesting to say that because on the one hand, from the business standpoint, I understand, you got to put a George Clooney, you got to put a big name white actor because that's how Hollywood works right now. But why not? I mean, if Michael Bay can, in the middle of post of Transformers, make a tiny film like Pain No Gain, why can't these directors do a small film that features
They don't believe in us. I think there's something about these guys that just they're like, you know what, it's not your time. You're not in vogue. You're not, part of the fad. You're not, this isn't the J-Lo Ricky Martin days. For some reason, it's a struggle for Latino actors to, I don't know if it's our skin color. I don't know if that agents are doing a terrible job in promoting us properly. I don't know if maybe Gina Rodriguez was in Annihilation. That's a science fiction film to me. But she wasn't necessarily the star, and like you said, she died pretty quickly in that movie.
Well, no, Latinos dying quickly is the new blacks dying quickly. Yeah. It is. They've moved up a notch. Now they're in the film, but they die. They die.
We now get to be in the film, but we now get to be killed very quickly,
Yes.
And that's it for episode 78 of the Highly Relevant Podcast. I'd like to thank Mike Sargent for hanging out with me, and I hope you guys dug this conversation as well. If you like this podcast, please share, retweet, and recommend our show on our social media platforms. And remember, it's through your word of mouth that our show can grow. I'm Jack Rico. See you next week on another episode of Highly Relevant.